of the Center for Nonprofit Studies at Austin Community College, and welcome to Civil Society, where we explore issues affecting our communal well-being through a nonprofit lens. We're a proud partner of ACC TV, but given COVID-19, we're going virtual for our 4th season. Our center is fully committed to being an anti-racist organization, to accelerating our personal learning journeys, confronting our biases and blind spots, and creating opportunities for others to do the same. This episode is part of our 9-part series on the Black experience in Austin. It's part of our larger commitment to similar series on the Latinx, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific, Islander American, and Native American Indigenous peoples' experiences in Austin. As we said in a public statement on racial equity back in June, we're moved by a new sense of urgency to heighten our community's consciousness of institutional racism and systemic impediments to racial equity, and to aggressively progress on the continuum to racial equity to fulfill America's promise for all of its inhabitants. You can access recordings of earlier episodes and register for future programs at nonprofitaustin.org/civil society. My guest today is mee-mee Stiles, president and founder of Measure, which she founded in 2015 when she challenged the Austin Police Department to show, quote, "show me the numbers," end quote, that they were using to report the results of agency performance measures. Realizing the disconnect between the department's big data reporting and the community, mee-mee created a methodology to measure community policing. Today, Measure has grown to not only address community policing, but health, education, and economic disparities. Quoting from her website, Measure is building an ecosystem whereby Black and Brown-led nonprofits can receive data and evaluation support through Measure's equity-focused tools for free. The organization is also responsible for mobilizing communities to address systemic disparities in health, economics, criminalization, and education. The website continues to read, "Data is not used effectively or collaboratively in the social justice ecosystem. When used strategically, data provides a common language upon which community members can meet and increase their knowledge about the causes and work together to create equitable change and increased awareness." mee-mee holds a Bachelor of Science in Communications, is completing or has completed a Master of Public Administration at American Military University, and received a certificate in performance measurement through George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. All that said, what impresses me the most about mee-mee is the scope and depth of her vision, her tenacity, her compassion, and her eloquence as an advocate for underserved communities. Welcome, mee-mee. Hope you're doing well this morning.
Thank you so much, Barry. I appreciate that introduction.
My pleasure, and well deserved. So before we talk about Measure and all the wonderful work that Measure is doing, just very briefly, tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always start off with, I am a mom. And so most of my journey is informed by my motherhood and my just constant battle with wanting to make sure that my kids don't have to do the same work that I have to do now, or my grandkids don't have to do the same advocacy work that I have to do now. And, my journey really started off as a child. I grew up in a home of activists. My grandfather did a lot of work between the Black Panther Party and the city that he lived in, and that was in California. My father was a Black Panther. My uncle was as well. My dad went on to have me at a young age, and then started really doing some work with NAACP. And I just really grew up underneath that pulpit of information and knowledge, sometimes welcome, sometimes unwelcome. But he just really cultivated this idea that my voice mattered.
That's quite interesting. So what led, I mean, it sort of is a natural question then is, what motivated you to create Measure? And talk a little bit about its goals.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything that I've done thus far has really kind of put me into this non-negotiable position, I think, to create Measure, right? Like, I mean, when I was in high school, I started the Black Student Union at our school. And then I went on to really create this idea that, you know, Black student unions should really be unified between different schools. And I mean, I even met my husband in that, you know, in high school at a Black student union dance, right? And so just this idea of like how unity is the goal for people of color. And then, you know, when I moved here to Austin, Texas back in 2014, it was really during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. We hurried down to City Hall to march and to protest and to be involved in some of the work that was happening. And then I very quickly joined in with the Austin Justice Coalition with Chaz Moore. And did, you know, put on like the Black Male Summit and just did some other work with that organization. And then I was actually put on a panel to discuss community policing. This was back in 2015. But I knew at that moment that I looked around the panel and saw that I was kind of like the only activist. And I knew that I was kind of being boxed in to be that stereotypical Black woman, angry activist. And I was supposed to project the feelings of the Black experience and the very true feelings. But instead, I took a direction of asking questions, asking bold, beautiful questions, I want to say. And those questions really led to a data conversation. And at that point, data was not sexy to talk about. And so I in turn sort of alienated my community because I wasn't representing that you know, that depiction of who I was supposed to be on that panel, standing up and fighting for Black lives and really projecting that anger. Instead, I was like, well, what are the key performance indicators that are assessing community policing? What's the budget? You know, what's the survey methodology? And those were the questions that I was asking. And then I think at that point, the mayor started echoing my verbiage. He was saying, yeah, like mee-mee said, where's the data? You know, and other people on the panel were saying, yeah, like mee-mee was just saying, you know, what's the data? What's the survey methodology? Who's getting the survey? And so that then led me to break away from Austin Justice Coalition, instead create Measure as a support organization to other Black and Brown led organizations, providing the data, providing the knowledge of numbers to support our advocacy, our collective advocacy.
So on your website, it says that data is not used effectively or collaboratively in the social justice ecosystem. Okay. So what do you and what does Measure do to make data effective, so it's not just a bunch of numbers, but it becomes a tool for the kind of social change that you're seeking to achieve?
So that's a really good question. And I think I'll explain our theory of change. I think that's the best way to explain that. And so we believe that if data reflecting lived experiences of marginalized communities is compiled, is examined, is leveraged by community-led teams who are then also equipped with organizational support, evaluation, and also measure tools, and we'll talk about that too. Then, so I said my if, and then now my then, is that communities and institutions can work together to design and implement equitable solutions to address social disparities. And so that's what we mean, right? So like, using measure tools, which measure has 3 tools, but 4 more very specifically. We have the care model, and I'm sure we'll get into that. We have a survey development tool that is community centered, equity focused. We have an equity focused group tool where we do evaluation where the community, the Black and Brown community must make up the majority of those in the group. And then we also have a tool that helps other Black and Brown organizations create key performance indicators, and it's called the Community Impact Metric Tool. And so we believe that it's, sustainability comes with data. And true advocacy and activism has to be embedded with data, right? So like we can have the emotion and we can tell our story about the experiences that we're actually having, which are very, very true. But on the other side, we can also show the numbers so that we're able to sit down with the police department, or we're able to sit down with the school district and say, hey, in 2015, Region 13 disciplined Black girls 10 times more than they did a white girl. And by doing that, it then brings everybody, it centers everybody on a number, which we believe also is a story, and it's, obviously it's people. That's real true humanitarian work is what we believe. And it's actually what we've proven so far.
I just, from my own reading and education, I was just picking up on what you're saying. I think goes back to Brown versus the Board of Education, which was the first time that data was really used in a significant way to change public policy in the United States. So it's you have any comments about that, or?
Yeah, I mean, we can even go even further back, right? To even to like Ida B. Wells with the, she's our, we call her our spirit sister. She did so much data collection. She was a true data activist. But yeah, I mean, it's all about the data. It's all about, showing through the numbers. But the other piece of this though is that the movement also needs the fuel of the community speaking up, advocating. We saw that, with just what happened in Austin just a few weeks ago and over the last couple of months across the world. It's creating this empathy that has never been seen before. And so that, it's incredibly important. And yeah, I mean, with Brown versus the Board of Education, that definitely was, Ruby Bridges, like that's the work that goes down in history and that actually changes things. And so when we talk about changing the world, we have to include the data.
So you made reference to in passing, and I was fascinated to read on your website, the care model. Can you just outline the care model and
Sorry?
affect change?
Sure, yeah. So I guess let me start with how the care model was even thought about. So we knew that research historically has left out Black and Brown communities in a major way. And this has been an argument for some time now, right? And so what we knew is that we needed to change that, especially starting right here within Austin. We had a project where we needed to go into a community very carefully because they had, a lot of communities are research fatigued or they're survey fatigued. And we wanted to make sure that the way that we went in there was going to address the problem holistically. And so we started to develop this idea that we need to go in with care. And we broke that down to C, community, A, advocacy, R, resilience, and E, evidence. And so the care model is really based on this framework of of community mobilization, through care, making sure that we are hitting each one of those components the entire time, with the community informing the work, being a part of the work. And then it's also embedded in this idea of community participatory action research, right? Where the researchers and the volunteers from Measure become a part of the work as well. Our voices are also informing the solutions that we develop. So it always starts with understanding the historical context of a problem. It always starts off with giving those that are involved in creating these solutions a space to have their core values elevated. We continue to reaffirm their core values. You know, there's certain things that research does that traditionally ignores the real lived experience of people of color. And that's really what the care model aims to disrupt. And it has done so well so far. You know, we have, just in the creation of the care model, it was informed by over 400 community members over the course of time. It was also informed by over 20 community leaders over the course of time. And I say leaders because I feel like everyone that takes part is a leader. And, you know, and we've used it in so many different facets so far, from organizing our space at the Women's March to, you know, using it right now in Oceanside, California, to start help start a new coalition of organizers that are working to create better policing and public safety.
So your organization, which you started 5 years ago, maybe less, is now working nationally.
Yes, sir, it is. It's now
That's
working
fantastic. That is fantastic. One thing that really interested me in our conversations and when I looked at your website was the work that you all are doing with regard to Black girls and women. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that challenge, because I don't think it's at the top of many people's minds, and I think it ought to be. So if you can just talk a little bit about that, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. So this is the work of the Innocence Initiative. And the Innocence Initiative, so while Measure's main thing is to provide free or low, very, very low cost data and evaluation services to Black and Brown nonprofits, we also have a few different initiatives like any other nonprofit. And this initiative is also driven by data. It's research to local action. So back in 2017, there was a report done out of Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality called The Erasure of Black Girls' Childhood, or Girlhood Interrupted. And so in that study, the researchers found that Black girls are seen as less innocent as early as 5 years old. So that means that they are looked at as, you know, needing less nurturing, or needing less comfort, or more culpable for their actions, or more sexualized, more aggressive, starting at the age of 5 years old. And what was really interesting about that study was that it wasn't just how maybe white Americans look at Black girls, it was how Black Americans look at Black girls. It was how Brown Americans look at Black girls. And so we understand too, through the work of Kimberly Crenshaw from back in the 90s, of intersectionality, and how, and I say that because it's sort of how Black women, or Black, you know, queer women are experiencing racism. And this is evident of that. And it's evident of 400 years of systemic historical racism, when we just saw Black girls, as enslaved Black girls, just to breed or to labor. And so there's never been any real intervention in breaking that mindset in America. Although we say that we're inclusive and we promote equality, and there hasn't been any real work. And so the Innocence Initiative is trying to do that and is actually doing that. So it's addressing the adultification bias of a Black girl. That's what that's called, is, seeing a Black girl like that is called adultification bias. And you'll see that play out in the home of a Black girl by maybe a parent saying, "Oh, you looking so fast," or "You're hot in the pants," or we may judge a Black girl on social media by what she's wearing. And if you really think about it, it's almost kind of disgusting, right? Like adults looking and judging what a little 5-year-old should be wearing. So that's we're doing a very comprehensive breaking of that within Central Texas, from policy change to, we said we were going to train 50 juvenile defenders to understand and recognize adultification bias, but so far we've had 700,
Wow.
a little over 700 defenders that have taken the training. So, and that's just since, for in a couple months. So we're very
I'm not good with data or math, but that seems to be exponential to me.
It's beyond our wildest, dreams, honestly, to get this word out. But then we also, as a person that believes in metrics and community impact, I'm not going to be satisfied until I see the community impact happen. And that impact includes less Black girls being, criminalized, less Black girls being suspended, and an increase and Black girls showing up in spaces that they didn't before, having that access and opportunity.
That's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Before I turn to some reflective type of questions, what can members of the audience and other people do to help Measure?
Measure belongs to the community. And so I wouldn't even say just like help, I would say just participate, right? What that looks like is number one, coming out to the events that we put on, because our events are community data gatherings. It's not just come together and talk. Which also is great to have these conversations because they're needed. They're absolutely needed. But when you come to a community data gathering, what your voice then turns into is it automatically turns into advocacy. We have evaluators that are listening and that are taking notes. And then that body of work that happens at the community data gatherings is then provided to another group, a care team, that's either working on policy or working on a project to help inform that project. So I would say just attend, and then if they're really interested in digging their teeth into this work, I would say to go onto our website and click the volunteer tab. When they click the volunteer tab, they will be invited to turn in an application. And once that application is received, they'll go through an hour-long orientation. And then we're very big on being cognizant of people's time and energy. So they let us know how many hours they can provide. And then twice a month, projects are sent out and they can choose what project they want to engage in.
Good. So my friend Francois introduced us, and I'm absolutely blown away by all that you've done in 5 years and all that you're doing and the gravity of the work that's moving forward. Absolutely. So going back to mee-mee for a second. So what would you tell the mee-mee of 25 when she was 25. Okay.
Ooh.
I'm assuming that you're over 25 at the moment, but but what would you tell the mee-mee of 25 to guide her into the life that she was seeking back then? What would you tell her?
I have a wonderful mentor. Her name is Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett. She's
Wonderful
a
lady.
president. Yeah, she is incredible. And I have another couple of amazing mentors, Pete Inman, Trish Brown. And so what I usually get from all of them is just this idea of being a smart risk taker. And high risk, high reward. Take those moments, walk through that door. And Colette told me a long time ago when I first got here, just say yes. And so that just say yes is definitely something that I've, taken on as a mantra for my life. But then also I weigh it against, my feasibility and what I'm able to do. And so the no's do come too. The no's are now more often just because I've said yes enough. But you have to say yes enough in order to get to be able to say no, to be honest with you. And so I would say just thinking about that to say yes back when I was 25. And it's not always going to work out. But just like my mom and my dad, they are serial entrepreneurs. And so they always, remind me to throw darts, just try. And I guess that also goes back to saying yes, because sometimes you're going to get a bullseye.
I think you've got one right now with Measure. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Let me open it up to our audience and see if there's questions. If not, I've got a bunch more. While we're waiting for that, let me ask you I don't know how I describe it, but you come from a very activist family. When you mentioned the Black Panthers and so forth, what kind of change have you seen in your experience in terms of the Black experience in Austin? I know you've lived in other places, Alaska and so forth. What kind of change have you seen, and what do you project is going to be the experience for your children and your grandchildren? Basically, your hopefulness or whatever about what's going on.
So I like that you said hopefulness, because I think hope has always been the experience of Black people. We are, bound by hope. We always have been. We are an incredible people, from having to endure the atrocities of enslavement to the insanity of Jim Crow, to the fight that we've had to take our place and to not just take our seat at a table, but to create our own new, table. We have been, to me, one of the most fascinating versions of humanity because of the strength that's just embedded within our DNA. To go from this, just 150 years ago, I can name what plantation my family came from, right? To now, people like, Kamala Harris, positioning to take her seat, to the Obama family taking their seat, to me sitting in front of you right now, talking about the disruption and the dismantling of historic trauma upon Black girls. I think we are just an incredible people, and that is our experience. A lot of times, especially in the work that I do, I see our chief of research has popped on, Paulette Blanc, and the work that we do in highlighting and elevating the bad data. We have to always recognize that we're highlighting it only because we have to. We know our experience. We know how powerful and incredible and how brilliant we are as Black people, but unfortunately, we have to prove that. So this is the drama that I work around every single day when I say that we have to advocate with numbers, because we shouldn't have to, right? Like, it should just be human to say, I'm wondering why I don't have enough, why I'm looking around the room and there's nobody that is brown around me. And so our experience is embedded in hope. Our experience is embedded in strength and in power. And you are going to see our experience play out in ways. And, you ask, what are my kids going to look like? And, what's their experience, or my grandkids, or my baby that's in my belly right now? How is she going to understand the world? She's going to understand that there has always been space for Black women. She's going to understand that, yes, that, Kamala is showing her that there's always been space for her and for her voice. She's going to watch me every single day be disruptive and be and throw darts. And so her experience is going to be shaped by this work. And it's also going to be shaped by her knowing of every single battle that Black and brown people have had to endure, and women, in order to get to this point.
I don't know what to say in response. That was damn eloquent. I believe we have a question out there, Kate.
Yeah, so someone is asking if you could just tell them what you see as the future of measure.
The future of measure, and I hope everyone participates. Again, measure doesn't belong to me. It was a brilliant idea, but it belongs to the community. And at some point, the future of measure, it's going to belong to the world. And what that looks like is that it's just, we are standing behind the brilliance of Black and brown leaders and of Black and brown organizers. So what measure does very, very clearly is that we provide data and evaluation support to other Black and brown organizations. It doesn't matter if they are here in Austin or if they are in Australia, right? Like, we are going to be that strength of data, that strength of just bringing unity into the conversation through the care model. When organizers come together, I can tell you, I was just in a meeting with these beautiful Black women, most of them are grandmoms, up in Los Angeles, California. And they said, we're going to start a website. We have t-shirts ready to go. We're doing all this work, but we just don't know what our strategy is. We don't know what our metrics are. We don't know how to measure it. And so that's how I know, like, this is the work that we're called to do, is just to provide that direct support. And so with the support of our whole community, with the support of philanthropy, I can see the future of measure just doing more, with our scalable model to support these organizations. And our model is like this. So let me be very, very clear about this. I am a person that believes in reparation, right? In a way that makes sense, and that in a way that's due to Black and brown communities, and especially Black communities. And the way that we do that within Measure is through our sustainable model. So we charge white-led organizations, institutions, the full price, the full rate to use our care model, or for someone like Paulette to go out and facilitate. And we use that money to support Black and brown led organizations. And it's just, the model works, the model works. So now we're able to support Black musicians within Austin. We're currently supporting the Black Leaders Collective in Austin. We are currently supporting the maternal health equity group in Austin, and all of that free of charge, because we have amazing allied white-led organizations that are into this idea that data can also include lived experience, and it can be informed by the people, for the people. And so that's the future.
Is there any other questions out there, Kate? Anybody here want to have a question?
I don't have any in the chat at the moment.
Let's pick up for a minute on the issue of reparations, okay? And share your thoughts on that. You know, what, I guess one way of looking at it is, I understand the model you're employing, but what is from your perspective, the response today for the injustices of the past? And in no way, I want to be clear, am I saying there isn't injustice today? Okay, but you know, the issues of slavery, Jim Crow, and also the analogous situation up north.
Yeah, you know, it's always kind of funny to me when we talk about people of of African Americans, very specifically, wanting reparation and wanting what's due to us. And so because it's not a new conversation, right? Like there's never going to be real reconciliation until you pay up. And to be honest with you, Martin Luther King, in some of his last words and some of his last documented rhetoric was, we need to go get our check, right? And so what that looks like is that he's talking about the opportunities that we've missed out on. 40 acres and a mule was a thing back then. I haven't seen any data on it yet. I'm sure it's out there, but what that type of generational wealth would have done to support Black people today, and it's not that we are blaming the grandchildren of those that did this. We're saying y'all still have benefited from the blood and the sweat of our family members. And we've never had the real opportunity to reconcile with that. And so, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, we've seen it done in Germany, and how they've treated, people that didn't look like them. And, it's just, it has to be a clearly community-wide apology, to be honest, of this is what happened. This is what we did. This is how you guys built this capital that we so often frequently are debating in session at. You guys built these streets that we're walking on. This has been your it's been off of your back. And so that's where I believe that this is the idea of reparation, the idea of atonement is completely 100% needed. And it's not, it doesn't have to be as complex as people think, to be honest with you. I think we kind of get into the weeds of the complexities of like, oh, how we do that. I mean, come on, we were able to respond to a pandemic and give, so many people money right away. This is called atonement, and we've never had that true atonement. And so we still continue to be literally the people at the very bottom of the barrel when it comes to every single disproportionality out there.
And a critical component of that is clearly people being conscious of what's happened and what's happening and so forth, and having it in front of their mindset. So a lot of what you just talked about seems to me is societal. What can society, i.e. government, institutions, and so forth. But on a very personal level, for people who have been, particularly in the past year, months, sensitized, that may or may not be the right word, but who are now fully conscious of what has happened in our country, what's happening in our country. What do you say to them? What can somebody like myself, our viewers, do in using the word reparations in a broader sense, atonement? What kind of actions can we personally take that makes sense and moves towards that atonement, recognition, in a positive way?
I love that question of like individual responsibility to anti-racism. That's really what that is. That's what that means to me. It means that when you go to work and you look around and you see that again, that no one is there that looks like you, there's no women, or there's no brown women, or there's no, queer men or anything like that, other than that one person that, and not saying that all white men look the same or anything like that. But, when you don't see that diversity, speak up. I think that's number one, right? So like you can claim to be a person that doesn't believe in racism, or a person that that is a humanist and all of that. But to be truly anti-racist, it means that you are actually doing the work. It's an action. It's actually an action. And so that's what that looks like, right? That looks like what we saw on Black Tuesday, choosing to reallocate some of your own resource to supporting Black-led organizers and organizations that are actually doing the work. It means going above what you would normally do and listen, because a lot of white people are listening, and which I think is a wonderful and a beautiful thing. But it also means to believe. So not just listen, but also believe the stories of Black people and our experience, and qualify us already by just when we open our mouths as experts in our experience, and then to support in a way that does not take over, right? We see in many cases, even with funders in philanthropy, they want to give funding or money and support, but then they want to be elevated over the work. They want to be acknowledged in ways. True individual anti-racism, true individual reparation means that you are just doing this because you actually care, and because you don't need to be repaid back, right? It's giving your time, it's giving your treasure, it's giving your talent to supporting in an incredible way, and in a way that's going to also be disruptive. If I'm going to put my neck on the line every day to fight for Black girls, that should be, and you choose to be an ally or to be a co-conspirator in this work, then you should be willing and ready to put your neck on the line right along with mine, if not over mine.
Good response. Thank you. I understand there's a couple more questions, Kate.
Yes. So what kind of outreach does Measure do within the Black, Brown, LGBTQ community?
So Measure, again, is a direct support organization first. So we provide, so let me just kind of give you some numbers. So we just within this past year, we've been able to provide 800 hours of free data and evaluation service to Black and Brown-led organizers. That's number one. That is the most important piece. Well, I wouldn't say that, but it's one of the most important pieces of the work that we do. We also provide direct service to Black girls. We do this through a program and an initiative that we have called the Travis County Girl Squad. And these are girls that have been negatively impacted by CV-19, or have been incarcerated, or have had a mom or a dad incarcerated, or have been homeless. And so we have a cohort of Black beautiful girls right now that are in this program. We also raise up an army of Black women mentors in Austin who are paired with these girls. We also have two psychologists on our team that provide our girls with with sessions every single month. They have 2 sessions a month with their girls. And so we're meeting, this was really a pivot that we had, you know, during COVID-19. We realized how much more our Black girls are going to need us to show up, not just, you know, in policy arguments and fights, but just directly providing them food. We give them food, money every single month. We give them just money. We give them $100 a month just to participate. And so, so those are the services that we provide. We also do some incredible work around redefining public safety. Some of the work that Paulette Blanc has been leading right now, with really just trying to reimagine what public safety is, what it could look like. We have had 5 national conferences so far called Big Data Community Policing that we're turning into Big Data Public Safety. We're a learning organization, and we realize that public safety is bigger than just community policing, and we're willing to change as an organization in order to really have a better conversation about it. We do a lot.
Yeah, well, that's a non sequitur. Kate, the other question or other questions?
Yes, so do you find that the data that your organization brings to the conversation will move this conversation forward?
So I think that question came around around the reparation discussion. And so let me just be very clear. Yes. And I say that because there are organizers on the ground right now that are led by Black people that are having this conversation. They've reached out to Measure. We will be supporting them directly. And so I really believe that when we truly see reparations, it's not going to come from like the federal level, right? Because we've been fighting for that for years. Dr. Claude Anderson, I think, has been one of the most brilliant researchers and one of the most brilliant orators on why we need reparation. If you don't know who he is, look him up. Dr. Claude Anderson. I had the pleasure of sitting underneath him and just listening to him for a while. And so, but I believe again that it's going to happen. It needs to happen at the local level, right? Cities are going to start understanding and recognizing what reparation looks like. There's already cities that are doing it. It's not anything new. They're doing it, it's working. And so that's what we hope to see Austin do. You know, Nook Turner, he is a organizer here on the East Side. He does some brilliant work in Austin. He puts on the Jump On It program. And so he's been, you know, if you look him up, he was just in the newspaper talking about some of the coalition work that he's building right now around this idea of atonement. And so we stand ready to support.
Wow. So we have no more questions right now from the audience. So what I'd like to ask to bring our episode to a close is, what haven't I asked or others asked that you want to share, that you think that both the viewers and the people who will be watching this on our website, that they ought to know?
Yeah, you know, I would like to actually throw it to my colleague, Paulette Blanc, and just to kind of get her, because we are in unprecedented times right now with COVID-19 and how it's just another layer to racism and how it's elevating disproportionality. And so she's done some incredible work. So I just really want to give her space, if that's okay, just to kind of talk about the work that she's done. Go ahead,
Welcome, Paulette.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paulette Blanc. I have the honor of serving as Measure's Chief of Research. Thank you all for inviting me into this space and being able to hear the conversations and the questions that you all had. I definitely wasn't kind of prepared to speak on anything really. But I definitely do want to share like some of the work that we have been doing on including increasing diversity and equity in research. I don't know if mee-mee has gotten a chance to talk about our community engaged research course. It is a course that we started here at Houston Tillotson, and this was in partnership with Houston Tillotson and another organization called Capacity Catalyst, where we are addressing a lot of the issues that happen within the data space, where we know sometimes data is concentrated in the hands of a few people. There's a lack of transparency within how the data is being used, especially in algorithms that can turn into tools like predictive policing or credit scores that can now be weaponized against communities. And so being able to increase the diversity of professionals in the field that can do data science, employ data science, elevate their own community voices, and the accompanying narrative that also comes with the data that is being released oftentimes is one of the works. I guess I think it's really important to highlight that. That's just one thing that we're working on. I don't know if I heard you mention it, so I just thought you guys might be interested in that space. We are having a session to kind of highlight that work. I'm talking about how data could be racist with Galvanize next week. And I think if mee-mee wants to, we can share out the details if you guys are interested in that. But definitely just want to say that there are so many good things that data can do, and it's been really informative to help us understand the breadth of what's happening within communities. And as mee-mee mentioned, we have to, at this point, use that to kind of help people see, because one of the things that we see that data can do is build those relationships, because like 2 + 2 is always 4, regardless if you're Republican or Democrat. And so the numbers can help get people to the table where we can start having a conversation about like what's actually happening. And then from that, you can build relationships and really build empathy for one another, because that's one thing that I think is missing often in these conversations is that empathy for one another. And so having data to bring us to the table and build that is something that's really cool and powerful. And I'm just excited that I've been able to do a lot of that with Measure. So
Thank you.
kind of was a mouthful. If you guys have any questions, definitely open to hear and answer.
Anybody have any questions of Paulette?
Hi, yeah, I have a question. I'm Christina. I work for Gisalo Cycle Initiative. It started in Austin. We're in San Antonio now too. I work in the San Antonio department. One of my coworkers just posted this webinar a few days ago, so I'm kind of new to this nonprofit to Measure, so I'm not sure what exactly it all is, but I'm learning throughout this conversation. I guess in our cycling nonprofit, we have been getting into data for the racial injustice for cyclists and pedestrians and jaywalking and, you know, people that may or may not be breaking the law that aren't in a vehicle. So I guess I just want to, maybe that community engagement course sounds very interesting. That might be something that I might be looking into to understand the data behind what the police are doing when it comes to cyclists and pedestrians. That's something that we're interested in learning more about and researching more about it and informing our community better, or, you know, motorists and pedestrians and cyclists on how they can go around the city. So that, yeah, thanks, Paulette. I'm gonna look into that community engagement course more, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely happy to link you up with just our page, and you can get more information. I think that also ties into a little bit of our public safety work, that, you know, part of public safety or on the law enforcement side is like crime and what is how crime is defined. Even as you talk about that jaywalking is like issues. I remember like being in middle school and watching kids my age get body slammed for jaywalking by police, and growing up like and seeing that as a norm, that definitely does shape your view of it definitely just kind of like shaped your perception of like how society defines what a criminal is and who a criminal is. And so that's definitely part of the work that we'll be digging into with our public safety team.
And Kate just put up their URL, and we'll follow up. If Paulette provides us with a little information, more information, we'll follow up and share with everybody on the call about the program. And we'll put it up on the website in which you'll find this recording in about a week or so. So thank you very, very much, Paulette. A additional treat in today's program. I appreciate it. Folks, I want to thank you all for participating. I want to especially thank mee-mee. This has been one of the most engaging of our series, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate the forthrightness, the passion, it's just very, very engaging. I want to thank Paulette for adding some information at the end of our program. And I, of course, want to thank Kate Tolliver, our managing producer, for providing all the support that makes these programs possible. You can read more about mee-mee, mee-mee styles and measure, and the issues we discussed, and view previous and future episodes of Civil Society at nonprofitaustin.org/civil society. I want to thank you all again and wish you all a great day, and have a great day. And thank you very, very much, mee-mee. This has been phenomenal.
My pleasure. Peace.